So imagine this for a second. You save up for months to take the perfect California vacation. Maybe it's Coachella with your best friend. Maybe it's a romantic beach trip with your girlfriend. Or maybe it's just a quiet Airbnb getaway in Palm Springs. At first, everything feels unreal in the best possible way. Music, beaches, pool lights, late night drinks, perfect Instagram pictures, normal vacation stuff, right? But then, somebody starts watching. A stranger keeps appearing in the background of your photos. Motion lights start turning on outside your Airbnb at 2 a.m. A man you saw earlier in a crowd suddenly appears standing inside your bedroom while you're asleep. And the creepiest part, none of these people knew each other, but all three stories ended the exact same way, with proof that somebody had been inside the house. These are three true California vacation horror stories that will seriously make you think twice before booking your next Airbnb. I was 26 when this happened, and up until then, Coachella had always been one of those trips that felt impossible to pull off. You know how there are vacations you keep talking about with your friends for years, but real life always gets in the way. Somebody's broke, somebody can't get time off work, somebody's relationship falls apart at the worst time. That was basically me and my friend Alyssa every single year. But finally, one spring, everything lined up perfectly. We both had enough money saved, we both got approved for vacation time. Flights weren't insanely expensive for once. So we looked at each other and were like, all right, screw it. We're actually doing this. And honestly, the first couple days felt incredible. The second we landed in California, the whole trip already felt different from normal life. We rented this small 2-bedroom Airbnb about half an hour away from the festival grounds. Nothing fancy, but it looked nice in the pictures. Palm trees outside, quiet neighborhood, modern interior. It felt like the perfect place to crash after long festival nights. The first day at Coachella completely blew my mind. Everywhere you looked, there were giant crowds moving like waves. Music coming from every direction at once. People dressed in these insane outfits that looked more like movie costumes than actual clothes. Some people were dancing in the middle of walkways like they forgot the rest of the world existed. It honestly felt less like a music festival and more like stepping into some weird alternate reality where nobody had jobs, bills, or responsibilities anymore. Alyssa and I were loving every second of it. We spent 2 straight days running between stages, taking pictures, trying random food trucks, staying up way too late, barely sleeping, then waking up and doing it all over again. By the third day, though, we were completely exhausted, like physically drained. That afternoon, while we were getting ready, Alyssa brought up taking Molly. I hesitated for a second because I'd only done it once years earlier, and thankfully nothing bad happened that time. Eventually, I agreed. We figured it was the last day anyway. We wanted one huge, unforgettable final night. Looking back now, that decision still messes with me. We took it sometime in the late afternoon before heading into the festival. At first, nothing really happened. I remember thinking maybe it wasn't even working. But then, about an hour later, it hit me all at once. And I mean hard. Suddenly everything looked brighter. The lights from the stages felt almost too beautiful to look at. The music sounded deeper somehow, like I could physically feel it moving through my chest. For a little while, I actually understood why people loved the stuff so much. But then things started feeling wrong. At first it was small. I noticed this guy standing in the crowd looking toward us. Normally that wouldn't mean anything. There were tens of thousands of people there. But after a while I started noticing him again, and again, different locations, different stages, same guy. He looked older than most people there, probably mid-30s, dark hair, scruffy facial hair, black shirt, heavy boots. Honestly, he stood out because he didn't really match the festival vibe at all. Everybody else looked colorful and relaxed. This guy looked serious, cold almost. The third or fourth time I saw him, I leaned closer to Alyssa and said, "Okay, I swear that same dude keeps following us." She laughed immediately. "Girl, you are way too high right now." And honestly, part of me wanted to believe she was right. But deep down, my stomach already knew something was off. Because every single time I turned around, he was there somewhere, near a drink stand. Across a crowd, standing beside a food truck, watching from farther back near a fence. Never close enough to cause a scene. Just always visible enough to keep triggering that awful little panic in the back of my brain. That's when my high started changing. My heart was beating too fast. The lights suddenly felt overwhelming instead of pretty. The music sounded distorted. I kept getting this horrible paranoid feeling like something bad was about to happen. Then things got worse. At one point during a set, the guy finally walked directly toward me through the crowd. I remember freezing instantly. He started dancing near me like he was trying to casually join our group. Then he leaned down near my ear and started talking. But the music was so loud I could barely understand him. I caught pieces of it, He was flirting, asking questions, trying way too hard to keep me engaged. I tried being polite at first. I told him I was there with my friend, tried giving short answers so he'd leave, but he wouldn't back off. He kept hovering closer and closer until I started genuinely feeling uncomfortable. Then suddenly I realized something. Alyssa wasn't beside me anymore. I spun around immediately, gone. At first I thought maybe she just stepped a few feet away, but within seconds panic hit me hard. I started turning in circles trying to find her face in the crowd, but everybody looked blurry and distorted under the lights. The guy noticed immediately. "You lose your friend?" he asked. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. Not concerned, not helpful. Interested. Then he smiled slightly and said, "I can help you look for her." I don't know why, but the second he said that, every instinct in my body started screaming at me not to trust him. I just shook my head and said, "No thanks." Then I pushed my way through the crowd as fast as I could, and the whole time, I could literally feel him watching me leave. I finally got away from the crowd and found this little patch of grass near one of the walkways. The second I sat down, everything hit me at once. My vision started going weird. The lights around the festival looked stretched and wavy, like somebody was smearing paint across my eyes. People walking by didn't even look real anymore. My chest was pounding so hard I honestly thought something might be medically wrong with me. I kept pulling my phone out with shaky hands trying to call Alyssa. No answer. Again, nothing. At that point, I was trying not to completely lose it in public. You gotta understand, Coachella at night is already overwhelming sober. Add thousands of people, flashing lights, loud bass shaking the ground, and a bad high on top of it. Dude, it felt like I was trapped inside a nightmare. Finally, after what felt like forever, Alyssa picked up. The second she answered, I almost started crying from relief. I told her exactly where I was sitting, and maybe 10 minutes later I finally spotted her weaving through the crowd toward me. The second she got close, her face changed immediately. "Okay, yeah, you do not look good." Apparently I was pale as hell, sweating. Shaking, my pupils were huge. I kept rambling about the guy following us, but she still thought the drugs were making me paranoid. Even so, she agreed we should leave early. And honestly, by that point, I didn't even care about missing the rest of the festival anymore. I just wanted out of there. The drive back to the Airbnb felt surreal. Neither of us talked much. The entire ride I kept staring out the window, feeling this horrible sense that something was wrong, but I couldn't explain why. Every set of headlights behind us made me nervous. Every time the driver slowed at an intersection, I'd glance around expecting to somehow see that guy again. When we finally got back to the Airbnb, the house was completely dark and quiet. At first, that should have made me feel safe. Instead, it somehow made things worse. Alyssa went to shower while I crawled into bed, still feeling messed up from the Molly. My body felt exhausted, but my brain wouldn't fully shut off. I remember laying there half awake, staring into the darkness while the air conditioner hummed softly in the background. At some point, I drifted into this weird half-sleep state. Not fully asleep. Not fully awake. Then suddenly, my eyes opened. And to this day, I still don't know what woke me up. Maybe it was instinct, maybe some tiny noise, or maybe deep down my body already knew somebody else was in that room. Because the second I looked toward the bedroom doorway, I saw a figure standing there, tall, completely still, just staring at me from the darkness. At first, my brain couldn't even process what I was looking at. It almost looked like part of the room itself. Then my eyes adjusted slightly, and I started making out details. Black shirt, tall frame, scruffy face, and the moment I recognized him, every ounce of fear in my body exploded at once. It was the man from the festival standing inside my Airbnb, only a few feet from my bed. I started screaming immediately, like full panic screaming, the kind where your throat burns because your body isn't even thinking anymore. I threw the blankets over my head and just kept screaming over and over. Then I heard footsteps running down the hallway. Alyssa burst into the room and flipped the light on. The doorway was empty. Nobody there. I was hyperventilating so hard I could barely even talk. I kept pointing at the doorway, trying to explain what I saw. Alyssa looked freaked out too at first, but after checking the house and finding nothing, she started trying to calm me down. "Brittany, listen to me," she said. "You're still high. That's probably what this is." And trust me, I wanted to believe her so badly, because the other option meant a complete stranger had somehow followed us home from Coachella, figured out where we were staying, entered the house silently, and stood over my bed while I slept. That thought was too horrifying to even process. I begged Alyssa not to leave me alone that night. So she climbed into bed beside me, and eventually exhaustion finally knocked both of us out. But what happened the next morning completely destroyed any chance of convincing ourselves it was all in my head. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Alyssa screaming my name. Not normal screaming either, real panic. The kind that instantly jerks you awake before your brain even catches up. I sat up fast, still half asleep, and saw her standing near my bedroom doorway just staring at the floor with this horrified look on her face. "Brittany," she said quietly, "oh my God." At first I thought maybe she found a bug or something stupid. My brain still wasn't fully working yet. Then I looked down, and my stomach dropped instantly. There were muddy boot prints on the hardwood floor, clear as day. Not faint marks, not little smudges. Actual shoe prints leading through the hallway. I froze. The prints started near the front entrance of the Airbnb. They came slowly down the hallway, directly toward my room, and stopped right at the bedroom doorway. Exactly where I had seen that figure standing the night before. I remember my whole body going ice cold, because in that moment, every single excuse disappeared. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't imagining things from the drugs. Somebody had actually been standing there watching me sleep. Then somehow it got even worse. The footprints turned around and led back down the hallway toward the front door, meaning whoever came inside had left quietly while we were asleep in the same bed only a few feet away. Alyssa immediately started freaking out too. She kept repeating, oh my God," while checking the locks and windows. The front door was locked when we woke up, which made absolutely no sense. Neither of us could figure out how someone got inside without waking us up. I grabbed my phone and called the Airbnb owner almost immediately. And honestly, his reaction creeped me out even more. The guy sounded annoyed instead of concerned. He kept trying to brush it off like maybe the prints were already there before we arrived. But that was impossible because we would have noticed giant muddy boot tracks in the hallway. Then when I mentioned somebody potentially breaking into the house, there was this weird pause on the phone. Like he suddenly got nervous. That silence hit me hard, because now my brain started going somewhere even darker. What if the guy from the festival didn't randomly find us? What if somebody connected to the property let him in? I know that sounds paranoid, but you gotta understand how terrifying the situation felt in the moment. We were two girls alone in a rental house hundreds of miles from home, and some stranger had literally stood over my bed while I slept. Your brain starts imagining every possible scenario. We packed our stuff ridiculously fast after that. I'm talking throwing clothes into suitcases without folding anything, leaving makeup scattered around the bathroom counter, forgetting chargers, all of it. Neither of us wanted to stay inside that house another second, and the craziest part. As we were loading our bags into the Uber, I remember looking down the street and seeing a black SUV parked farther down near the corner. Engine running. Dark tinted windows. I couldn't see who was inside, but something about it instantly made my chest tighten again. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it really was just paranoia after everything that happened, but I still remember how fast that SUV pulled away once our Uber started driving off. To this day, I still don't fully know what happened that weekend. Maybe the guy at Coachella became obsessed after seeing us there. Maybe he followed our rideshare. Maybe he watched us long enough to figure out where we were staying. Or maybe there's another explanation I still haven't figured out. But one thing has stayed burned into my memory for years, that image of him standing silently in my bedroom doorway, not moving. Not speaking, just watching me in the dark while I slept. And honestly, I've never touched Molly again after that trip, because even now, part of me still wishes I could convince myself it wasn't real. But those muddy boot prints proved otherwise. A couple summers ago, my girlfriend Valentina invited me to come stay with her family in San Diego for a week. And look, I'm not even going to pretend to play it cool. I was insanely nervous. Meeting your girlfriend's family for the first time already feels stressful enough. But then she casually tells you her parents own this giant beachside villa in California. Dude, the pressure instantly goes through the roof. I remember landing on a Friday afternoon completely exhausted from the flight. Valentina and her dad picked me up in this older Toyota that honestly looked kind of funny compared to how rich they clearly were. Her dad was super friendly though, talking the entire drive like we'd already known each other for years. Then we pulled into their neighborhood, and my jaw literally dropped. The houses out there looked unreal. Massive properties right beside the ocean. Palm trees everywhere. Expensive cars parked in almost every driveway. It felt less like a real neighborhood and more like some place celebrities hide from paparazzi. When we finally pulled up to their house, I just sat there for a second staring. The place looked like a movie set. Huge white villa, glass balconies. Ocean directly behind the property. You could hear waves crashing from the driveway. I remember thinking, okay, this trip is going to be amazing. And honestly, at first it really was. My room was downstairs on the lower level of the house, kind of separated from the rest of the bedrooms upstairs. It had these giant windows facing the beach, and the view was insane. You could literally lay in bed and watch the ocean. That first evening, Valentina wanted to walk the beach before sunset. And if you knew Valentina, you already know exactly what came next. Instagram pictures, a ridiculous amount of Instagram pictures. I swear I took at least 100 different poses, different angles, different lighting, standing by the water, sitting in the sand, walking away from the camera, pretending not to notice me. Every boyfriend knows the struggle. Eventually, while scrolling back through the pictures, something caught my attention. At first I thought it was coincidence, but then I noticed the same man appearing in the background over and over again. In one picture, he was standing farther down the shoreline, staring toward us. In another, he looked closer, then another. Same guy every single time. Dark clothes, hood up. Just standing there, watching. At first, I honestly thought maybe my brain was playing tricks on me because it felt too weird to be real. Beaches are crowded. People wander through photos all the time. But this felt different, because the more I looked through the pictures, the more it started seeming intentional. Like he wasn't just randomly ending up in the background. It looked like he was following us down the beach. I immediately looked up toward where he had been standing. Gone. Completely gone. I even walked a little farther down the shoreline, pretending to casually look around, but I couldn't find him anywhere. When I showed Valentina, though, she barely reacted. She just shrugged and laughed. Babe, it's a beach. There are people everywhere. And yeah, logically she was probably right. Still, something about it stayed stuck in my head. Later that night, Valentina and I went back down to the beach for a bonfire one of her friends was throwing. By then, it was close to midnight. The beach looked completely different at night. Fires glowing in the distance, music playing softly from portable speakers, people drinking, laughing, running around near the water. For a while, everything felt normal again. Then I stepped away to take a phone call from my boss. I walked maybe 30 or 40 feet away from the bonfire because I could barely hear over everyone talking. While I was standing there on the phone, I happened to glance farther down the shoreline. And that's when I saw him again. At first, all I could make out was a dark figure standing near the water. Not moving, just staring directly toward me. The second I realized who it was, my stomach tightened immediately. Same dark clothes, same build, same hood. I remember pretending not to notice him because suddenly every instinct in my body was telling me not to react. I just turned slightly away and kept talking on the phone while trying to watch him out of the corner of my eye. And the creepy part, he didn't move either. He just stood there in the darkness watching me. The next morning, I woke up feeling absolutely horrible. At first, I thought maybe I was hungover from the bonfire, but this felt different. My stomach was wrecked. My head was pounding. Every time I stood up, I felt like I might throw up. So while Valentina and her family made plans to go downtown for dinner later that evening, I told them I was staying behind at the house to rest. Honestly, I was relieved to have the place quiet for a while. I spent most of the day half asleep in bed downstairs watching random television shows and drifting in and out of sleep. By the time the sun started setting, everybody else had already left. And that's when things started getting weird again. At some point that night, I fell into this really deep sleep. Then suddenly I started hearing this tapping noise. Fast, repetitive, annoying as hell. In my dream, it sounded like somebody tapping their fingers rapidly on a glass table. The sound just kept getting louder and more aggressive until it finally dragged me awake. The second my eyes opened, the tapping stopped. Completely. At first, I just laid there confused, trying to wake up fully. The room was dark except for a little moonlight coming through the windows. I remember checking my phone and seeing it was sometime after midnight. Then I slowly turned my head toward the large window facing the exterior stairs outside, and my entire body froze. There was somebody standing at the window, a man, wearing a black hood, and the second he smiled and lifted his hand to wave at me through the glass, I realized exactly who it was. The guy from the beach. I swear my heart almost stopped. For maybe one full second, neither of us moved. He just stood there smiling at me through the window like this was completely normal. Then suddenly he sprinted out of view. I heard footsteps pounding up the exterior stairs outside almost immediately. That's when pure survival mode kicked in. I jumped out of bed and ran straight to my bedroom door. A second later, I heard the front door upstairs open, not knock. Open like he already knew exactly how to get inside. The second I heard footsteps moving through the house, I threw my entire body weight against my bedroom door downstairs. Then the handle started jerking violently. I can still hear that sound perfectly in my head, the metal rattling, the door shaking. Whoever was on the other side was trying hard to force it open. I remember planting both feet against the floor, and pushing back with everything I had. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone trying to unlock it. Then suddenly the pressure stopped. Complete silence. At first I thought maybe he'd left. Then I heard slow footsteps backing away down the hallway. That was the moment I grabbed my phone and called 911. I was whispering at first because I genuinely thought the guy might still be somewhere inside the house listening. The dispatcher kept trying to calm me down while asking questions, but I could barely even think straight. All I remember saying over and over was, "Somebody's inside the house. Somebody got inside." Those next few minutes felt endless. Every tiny sound made my heart jump. The house suddenly felt way too big and way too quiet. I kept staring at the crack underneath the door, expecting to see somebody's shadow standing there. Then finally I saw flashing red and blue lights outside through the window. I have never felt relief like that in my entire life. Police officers cleared the house while I stayed downstairs shaking like crazy. A few minutes later, Valentina and her family came rushing back after police contacted them. Everybody was panicking at once. Valentina immediately ran upstairs to check if anything had been stolen from her room, and then we heard her scream. Not scared screaming, horrified screaming. We all ran upstairs, and I'll never forget the look on her face. She was standing frozen near the corner of her bedroom, pointing upward toward a small black object mounted near a shelf. A hidden camera. Tiny, almost impossible to notice unless you were specifically looking for it. The police carefully removed it while everyone just stood there in shock. Then, things somehow got even more disturbing. Valentina started checking through her drawers and realized multiple pieces of clothing were missing. Bathing suits, underwear. Random personal stuff. The guy had been inside the house before. Probably multiple times. And judging by the camera placement, he may have been secretly recording her for who knows how long. That realization made everybody sick. The police took the camera as evidence and searched the property, but they never found the guy. No fingerprints. No clear signs of forced entry, nothing. And honestly, that was almost the worst part, because it meant this creep had somehow figured out how to move around that house without anyone noticing. To this day, I still have no clue how he found us. Maybe he saw Valentina on social media. Maybe he followed us from the beach. Maybe he'd already been watching the property long before I even arrived. But I still think about one detail constantly. That smile at the window. Not angry. Not rushed. Calm. Like he already knew exactly how close he was to getting inside that room. Last year, my girlfriend and I decided to take a quick trip to Palm Springs for a few days. Nothing huge. Just one of those relaxing little getaways where you unplug for a while, sit by the pool, eat good food, and pretend life isn't stressful for a weekend. We found this modern Airbnb about 15 minutes outside the main part of the city. The listing looked perfect online. Big backyard, private pool, quiet neighborhood, huge glass sliding doors facing the patio. The description kept emphasizing one thing over and over: very private property. And honestly, when we first got there, it really did feel private. The house sat kind of isolated from the others nearby. During the day, the place looked beautiful. Mountains in the distance. Hot desert air. Palm trees moving slightly in the wind. It felt peaceful. The first day was completely normal. We unpacked, ordered food, swam for a while, watched movies, and passed out early. Nothing weird happened at all. Then came the first night. Sometime around 1 or 2 in the morning, I woke up suddenly because I thought I heard a noise outside. Just a soft thump somewhere near the backyard. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough to wake me briefly. I remember laying there for a second listening carefully, but everything went quiet again almost immediately. Eventually I convinced myself it was probably the house settling or maybe something falling outside from the wind. So I went back to sleep. The next day, things still seemed mostly normal. We spent hours hanging around the pool drinking and relaxing. At one point, though, I thought I heard what sounded like somebody yelling from really far away. Not screaming. More like someone calling out to another person in the distance. I mentioned it to my girlfriend, and we both kind of laughed it off because the sound echoed weirdly out there in the desert. But looking back now, I think somebody was already nearby watching us. Night 3 was when everything completely fell apart. My girlfriend had already gone to sleep, but I was still awake laying on the couch, scrolling through my phone. The house was dark except for the television glow and a little moonlight coming through the blinds. Then suddenly I noticed light shining through the edges of the blinds. One of the backyard motion lights had turned on. At first I didn't think much of it. Bugs trigger those things all the time. But then I noticed something strange. The light stayed on for maybe 20 seconds, then switched off. About 10 seconds later, another motion light farther down the side of the house suddenly turned on. Then another, slowly moving position by position around the backyard, like something was walking through the property, triggering them one at a time. That's when my stomach tightened. I sat up immediately and woke my girlfriend. You see that? We both watched silently as another light clicked on near the back fence. Then another closer to the pool. At that point, there was no denying it anymore. Somebody was outside, and whatever they were doing, they were moving slowly, almost carefully. I remember standing there debating what to do for maybe 10 seconds. Part of me wanted to just lock every door and call the police immediately. But another part of me kept thinking maybe it was nothing. Maybe somebody accidentally wandered into the yard drunk or something. So I made a decision I immediately regretted. I told my girlfriend to stay inside while I checked outside myself. I walked into the kitchen and grabbed one of the biggest knives from the knife block. And trust me, even holding that knife, I still felt nervous as hell. The second I slowly opened the sliding glass door, the backyard went dead silent. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. The air outside felt weirdly cold compared to earlier that day. I stepped carefully around the pool, scanning the yard while the motion lights glowed around me. At first I didn't see anyone. Then I noticed footprints in the sand near the side fence. Very clear shoe prints. Fresh, the prints led away from the fence directly toward this small storage shed sitting beside the house. The second I saw that, every survival instinct in my body started screaming at me to go back inside. But instead, I followed them, slowly, knife shaking in my hand. The footprints stopped right at the shed door. I stood there maybe 3 feet away, just staring at it while my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. At first there was no sound at all. Then suddenly, from inside the shed, I heard a man's voice say calmly, "Excuse me, could you open the door, please?" I froze instantly. The voice sounded completely normal. That's honestly what made it so terrifying. Not angry, not aggressive, polite. Then right after saying that, the guy started laughing quietly inside the shed. This low, creepy little laugh, like he knew exactly how scared I was standing there. That was it for me. I turned around and sprinted back toward the house faster than I've ever moved in my life. I slammed the sliding door shut, locked it immediately, and started yelling for my girlfriend to call 911. She was already crying by the time I got back inside because she could tell from my face that something was seriously wrong. Those 20 minutes waiting for police felt endless. Every tiny sound outside made us jump. We kept expecting to suddenly see somebody's face appear outside the glass doors. When officers finally arrived, they searched the entire backyard first, then carefully checked the shed. Nobody inside. At least not anymore. But according to the officers, it definitely looked like someone had been staying there. They found empty water bottles, food wrappers, blankets shoved into the corner, like somebody had secretly been living inside that shed for days. Then one of the officers walked back into the living room holding something in his hand. A dirty baseball cap. He asked if it belonged to either of us. The second I saw it, my stomach dropped, because that hat absolutely was not there before. The officer said he found it shoved behind the couch inside the house, meaning whoever had been hiding outside had already been inside the Airbnb at some point. Maybe while we were sleeping, maybe while we were out by the pool, maybe while we were sitting 10 feet away completely unaware. We packed our bags almost immediately after police left. Didn't even wait until morning. We threw everything into the car and drove straight out of Palm Springs in the middle of the night. And the creepiest part, the Airbnb host never contacted us afterward. No apology, no concern, nothing. Which honestly still makes me wonder if that property had a history nobody told us about, because somebody was definitely watching us out there in the dark. And if those motion lights hadn't turned on one by one that night, I honestly don't want to think about what might have happened next.